Okay, let's get on with a couple of questions that I received. I want to answer those. They are related to extinction. Here's the first one. Fellow says, Bill, can you please post where you got that extinction graph of the Cretaceous Terrestrial Revolution showing the extinction of the ferns and the flowering plants, etc., taking over? I'm trying to find the reference. He couldn't find it. Okay, so here it is. Okay, this is where the paper appeared in 2008. Okay, that was the paper. I think that was the first paper that dealt with that issue. I cannot say for sure because the graph that I found originally was different than the one that Graham Lloyd there put out there. And this is, I guess, a presentation that he gave, a PowerPoint presentation. And that's number 9. You can see the graph is the number 9 on his presentation, and you see there the link, so you can find it there. Okay, and what I've done with that is essentially, modify it a little bit and clarify it. I don't take ownership of that information. I'm just going with what these people found out. As I understand it, it was a 4-year study where they showed that the flowering plants essentially displaced all other plants in the last, 50, 60 years of the Cretaceous. And if you look at that, what it's telling you is that the dinosaurs, which were feeding on conifers, primarily probably cycads or cycadioids, they were running out of forests and jungles. They had very little to eat, and their populations had expanded by that time. And so you have this crossover where you have more and more animals and fewer plants. And at some point, the extinction happens. Why? Because it's a mass extinction. What is a mass extinction? A mass extinction is the disappearance of a what? A food chain. Mass extinctions only have to do with food. No asteroids, no diseases, no climate change, none of that nonsense. It's food. When food disappears, the animals disappear. That's how simple it is. Okay? Give me a second here. Oh, I'll get a little trouble. Okay. So again, it's got to do with that. The extinction theory we propose here is that all mass extinction, mass, not the background extinctions like Neanderthals, right? Mass extinctions only have to do with the disappearance of food. That's how humans are going to die. We're going to die when our food disappears. Why does it disappear? Well, because our economic system collapses and disappears. What do I mean by that? I mean that money itself disappears. At some point, we will have no interest in receiving money. We will have no faith in money. In God, we will not trust anymore. So the dollar will have to be changed to in God we don't trust, or something like that. Okay, another issue a fellow raised is, he says, I just ran across this problem when I read the study of 28,000-year-old Cro-Magnon man found in Italy. The study made it clear that this guy had no Neanderthal admixture. Okay, they found bones there, right? And they went to say it would be impossible to interbreed with Neanderthals. Yeah. And I railed completely against this admixture theory, which was a shock to me. I always thought European people had a little Neanderthal admixture. Guess not. And yeah, all I can tell you is this never happened. Okay? Neanderthal humping a girl, I doubt that very much. I don't think that ever happened. And I give you reasons. I have my arguments for why that never happened. Okay, here's one of them. Just very quickly, was she taken against her will, or did she come voluntarily, consensual? How does this work? Okay, please let me know. Okay, which one you think is the right one? Okay, so. But here are my reasons. I have a series there for those who want to watch it. It's the Neanderthal series. This is just the heading of it, Neanderthal series. It's known as Against Admixture. And I have several videos, I think it's 15 of them, where I explain point by point why Neanderthals could never have mated with humans. It's like really like saying that monkeys mated with us. Never happened, never will. Okay? In fact, they tried a mixture of human with a chimpanzee, and it didn't work. And that's more or less what would have happened if Neanderthals mated with us. But here, let me show you just a summary of my arguments. Okay, you can watch the videos and they'll explain a lot more detail. Here I'm just going to give you kind of like the headlines of what issues I touched upon in the videos. And here's the first one. Against admixture, the Neanderthals and Cro-Magnons, they never met. Okay, in fact, I think that the only reason we entered like 35,000 years ago or thereabouts into Europe, into continental Europe, right, was because the Neanderthals were no longer around. Until then, any human group that would enter into Europe, he would be slaughtered by the Neanderthals. On the other hand, you see humans all the way going all the way to China. And you say, well, how come they went all the way to China, they didn't go into Europe? Well, it's very simple. There were no Neanderthals killing them from Africa all the way to Asia. On the other hand, there were Neanderthals killing them when they tried to enter Europe. And only when the Neanderthals were gone, that's when humans were able finally to enter Europe and find this cemetery of dead Neanderthals. There's no mtDNA, mitochondrial DNA. We have no Neanderthal mothers because that's what it would indicate if we would have had the Neanderthal mtDNA. We would have had Neanderthal mothers. No Y chromosomes. That's passed on from father to son. So we have no Neanderthal fathers. So we have no Neanderthal mothers, no Neanderthal fathers. I think that does it pretty much. There's very little Neanderthal DNA in us, only 2 to 3%. That's all they found, and they probably stretched those numbers a little bit to make them fit. And yeah, that's very likely because, we even have chimpanzee DNA for all that matter. The issue is we have very little, and what that indicates is that we all descended from Homo erectus and some other intermediary that came, one from Africa and the other one from Europe. Neanderthal evolved in Europe, okay, completely in Europe. There was, you have in England, you have footprints and some, mammoth bones that were found, and they're dated to close to 800,000 years ago, the oldest one. The one is at Happisburg. And when you look at that, you're saying, okay, there was some kind of human-like creature living 800,000 years ago in England, merry old England. And you say, how can that possibly be? Yeah, and it's the Homo erectus who went there, okay? And Homo erectus, he did not have clothes. And it was very cold in Europe at the time, in fact, colder than it is today. There were glaciers extending all the way to northern England, Scotland, thereabouts. And so the question is, how did this guy survive over there? Well, the point here is that, these were woolly humans, the Homo erectus, and they got used to the cold. They went little by little, after thousands of years, they got used to the cold. From them descended the Heidelbergs or the antecessors, one of those groups. And from those, you have the Neanderthals. They all evolved in Europe. Neanderthals never knew what clothes were, and therefore they were with their feet, no sandals, no shoes, no boots. They were standing on the snow, just directly like a wolf would do, like a bear would do, like a mammoth would do. They needed no clothes. Okay, so they ran around nude, hunting, killing, whatever they did. That's how the Neanderthals survived. When we come from Africa, sunny old Africa, into Europe, we needed clothes. We invented clothes. And guess what? If we would have met a Neanderthal, nude, a gorilla there, he would have noticed a little difference between him and us, and vice versa. We would have seen this monster there, this gorilla, hairy ape, right? And we were dressed because we were cold. So we invented needles, we sewed, we put hides together, we covered ourselves. They didn't have to. Okay, so I doubt very much, even from the clothes point of view, that we would have made it. They would have recognized us as a different species. Okay, so there's part of the problem that we have from this theory that the Neanderthals were mated with us. There was admixture, some mixing of the species, because we're not even talking about races really. And they did selective evidence. And here's my good old friend Svante Pabo, and he sweeps a lot of the stuff underneath the rug in his famous paper, in which he became famous, in his group, right? And what did they do? Well, they mixed up a lot of stuff, and they didn't tell you the whole story when they go into the public arena. When they write their paper, they're very careful, because they know they're going to be peer-reviewed, and some other people are going to complain about their findings and so on, or going to question their data. When you go to the public, you can say anything you want, and that's when they start lying, and they exaggerate their findings, okay? And what are they exaggerating? Well, let me point out the main point, and that's they say non-Africans. They always talk about, Africans and non-Africans, and that's a way of throwing the important details underneath the rug, okay? They're sweeping that underneath the carpet, right? And what is it? The American Indians and Papua New Guineans, they have more Neanderthal blood, or DNA, right, than Europeans, where the Neanderthals lived. And in other words, Cro-Magnons, right, or descendants, us. Here we are Europeans, right? I'm descended from Europeans for sure, right? And the Europeans have less Neanderthal DNA than Papua New Guineans and American Indians. And they put that in the report. But then they sweep it over by saying non-Africans. They lump everybody together with Africans and non-Africans. And that's cheating, that's lying, okay? They should make this is exculpatory evidence. Yeah. You got to leave that in there. You got to make people aware, hey, we got to explain this. Why do Papua New Guineans and American Indians, why do they have more Neanderthal DNA? And that got swept into history. You'll never hear about it again, okay? Another issue, Neanderthals never lived in the Levant, in the Middle East, in Israel and Iraq specifically. And they say we admixed over there first. We had sex with the Neanderthals over there. Absolute nonsense, poppycock. And here's one of the reasons, Neanderthals were cold weather animals, okay? And they didn't ride camels. They didn't go to that far south. And the reason that you can tell that there's a problem, and again, people don't look at the details, and that's that if you look at the sites in Iraq and Israel where so-called Neanderthals were found, you will note that those Neanderthals, or alleged Neanderthals, were not the classical Neanderthals that you find in Europe. Okay, they're not the same. There's differences. And you got to look at the papers written by people from over there, from Israel, and from the archaeologists or paleontologists, and they tell you it's not the same guy that's in Spain, in France, in Germany. Okay, so those Neanderthals of the West, the classical Neanderthals, they do not match in many ways the skulls and other fragments found in the Levant. So and again, you got to look at the videos, and I'll go into more detail. I put the papers there from where I got all that information, okay? So no, Neanderthals never went that far south. They were cold weather animals. We went north because we found prey up there, food, Neanderthals weren't about to leave a place where they had abundant food to go south for what? For what reason? To sunny Israel? It never happened. Okay? Anyways, then there's the issue of race versus species. Were Neanderthals of the same race or the same species as humans? So we got to look at that. Are they different species? And for that, you have to define the terms. What is a species? What is race? Okay, and so again, you got to look at the video. There's an argument on that. We found no intermediate Neanderthals, half-breeds. They try to fit in the fellow kid there in there, but it's like force putting evidence to make their case. That's all it is. There is no transition between Neanderthals and humans. You find there's nothing in the record to indicate that at all, and we will never find it because there never was admixture. So, it's very simple. Looks, clothes. I mean, if we came in there dressed up because it was cold and they were nude with their hairs covering their body like a gorilla, well, I don't know. I think both species would have seen each other as different. I don't think you're going to go into a cave and have sex with such a monster. Men with women, human men with Neanderthal women and vice versa. It doesn't happen. And not in the wild, especially. In fact, in the wild, the worst thing you can do is have confidence. You're quite naive. More than naive, you're dead if you trust. In the wild, you don't trust. Never trust. Okay, you treat everybody as an enemy, including those of your own species. So keep that in mind. And there it is. Consensual sex, was it? No, I don't think so. I don't think female would have gone there and said, oh, I'm going to sleep with this Neanderthal, cheat on my husband or whatever. And one of the things is shouting distance. One of the things that all animals learn, especially humans, when they travel in groups of clans or whatever they traveled as, and same for Neanderthals, by the way. When they travel, no one leaves the clan, the tribe, whatever you want to call it, the group. No one leaves it very far away because any animal can attack them. They should be within shouting distance. You should be able to shout and your group comes and helps you out. And especially if someone wants to have sex with you, an ape wants to have sex with you. You say, my God, you shout and everybody comes and helps you. So there is this thing where, you find yourself in the middle of nowhere with some other species and you have sex in the middle of the woods. Okay, so please show me the movie of how this happened, okay? And yeah, it's got to be within shouting distance. And then some people say there's been trade. They trade seashells. They found seashells in France. They said, well, those don't belong there. They must have come from somewhere else. They came from the Neanderthals, and then we traded, collars, made for a bear skin or whatever, or a mastodon skin, a mammoth skin, No, there was no trade. Trade is something that begins with civilization. No other animal in the history of life on Earth ever had trade. Trade is something that people today think about. In those days, there was no trade. You had to hunt your own stuff, and if you were successful, you lived another day. So yeah, and here it gives you an idea of how they're trying to persuade you to believe that there was sex, and this is what they show you, and they show you, this is the 1909, the first Neanderthal that they made a picture of, a drawing, and that's what he looked like, more or less. You can see how they've been changing over time. The Neanderthals have been becoming less hairy, whitish. We have to make them white, because we can't have a black Neanderthal or a yellow Neanderthal. It's got to be a white man, right? He was in Europe after all, right? You can see how it's changed over time. Why? Because you ask any girl if she would sleep with a 1909 guy, and she probably would say no. She wants someone, viral, but not that much. And then you have this other one, the 2013, she might be willing to sleep with him. So you got to make it palatable to a woman to say, yeah, I would sleep with this guy, but not with this other guy. And that's part of the propaganda that they put out there to try to get you to believe that there was sex between the two species. Okay, and that's all I can tell you. Yeah, it's absolute nonsense that Neanderthals died because they were a smaller population that's kind of dissolved in the much larger human population. No, Neanderthals died because their population pyramid overturned. It's going to happen to all species, unless mass extinction comes earlier, which is in our case, we're going to die through a mass extinction, not because our population pyramid overturns, which is already overturned, by the way. Since 1963, our growth rate has gone down. And we're down to 1, it's going to go down to 0. We keep going like we are now. So we're not reproducing anymore. Why? Because we moved to the cities. When you move to the cities, you have no more children. You know, the economy prevents it, the culture prevents it. There's many constraints, and so people don't have children. Can't have 10 children in an apartment. And so, yeah, we're having fewer kids, and that's what happened in the Neanderthals. They started having fewer kids, one, and then the other one is that their DNA, their genetics, you know, their genetic pool was whittling away. They were becoming more and more clones of each other until they finally expired.